I mean, really, it's an added. But if Bridget were here, it would be just, and Jenny then. But we do need it with them not here. Well, thank you. Welcome back to the public, and we move on to the next item 8, pension fund administration update. It's been only, I think, 7 weeks since the last meeting, but Jenny?
Yeah, hello everyone. It is a very brief report, like you say, because it's not been that long. The LPPA now produce a quarterly report for us, and so at the last meeting we had April, May and June, and the next quarter's report will cover July, August and September, so I won't actually receive it until October, so I'll be bringing that to the next meeting. So this report is quite short. It's just letting you know that everything's running quite smoothly. The annual benefit statements are available now. And the news is that the LPPA are moving to a new administration system. Current system is known as Altair, and they're moving to a new system called Universal Pensions Management, known as UPM. And they're hoping that this will give us a lot of improvements and a lot more access, I think, as well, to see things and to run reports. But yeah, if anyone has any other questions on administration.
Thank you. Councillor Young?
May I just ask for a little bit more information on the Guaranteed Minimum Pension Reconciliation Project? I think it's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's actually been ongoing for a number of years, most probably 5, and we are coming to the end of it now, and there are just a few of the active records that need to be updated with people's guaranteed minimum pension values. It's no longer in effect, really. And so we've been reconciling a lot of pension benefits to make sure that the GMPs have been taken into an account when paying people's pensions. But it's a very old project, and it is nearly finalised. I expect it to be finalised by the end of the year, but it is just some last minute updates. We're at the very end of it. I think we paid for it all a number of years ago, most probably 2 or 3 years ago. So it's just something historic, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny. Is the report noted? Thank you. Moving on to the item 9, Ealing Pension Fund Responsible Investment. There is a report and 3 appendices. So we asked for this report at the last meeting on the 15th of July, and I'm very pleased with the scale of the report that Bridget and colleagues were able to provide to us. So thank you to them for that, because there's plenty for us to get our teeth into. Would you like to introduce the report, Bridget?
Yes, okay. So as Councillor Donnelly has said, this is a report which is taking forward the 1-hour training you had from Hyman's at the last meeting, just introducing the concept of environment, social and governance issues in view of the net zero pledge that the council has made in its work plan. So basically, Ealing Council Pension Fund has already embarked on a responsible investment journey quite a while back, which culminated in some of our funds being invested passively. When you invest passively, it means you don't really have a choice as to where your investments get placed. They will invest in an index and you would have an exposure to every stock in that index. So what we've done is to actually invest in a specialist index, which has been tilted to be low carbon, which will mean that our exposure to carbon will be lower than what you would get in a conventional index. So far, Ealing has already taken that step. We're also members of the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum. So we've been long-term members of this forum, which is a forum that works with local authorities to engage with companies, to to ensure that they're doing things to protect shareholder value. And this, the choice to join the local authority pension fund forum was actually taken at one of the AGMs by a show of hands, which was, you know, the first time they've ever had that. In addition, we have made that allocation to impact investments, which will give the council an opportunity to invest in greener type investments or investments that have an impact on society. So taking forward from the last training session, our advisors have said the best way to do this is to have a workshop. Before the workshop, they will send out a questionnaire to all pension fund panel members. We have had a session like this before, which is how we came to formulate the responsible investment policy that we already have. So this is basically doing that process again, as we have quite a number of new members. You get a questionnaire, and then there will be a workshop, which we're looking at possibly being a daytime workshop, which will basically marry up all the returns we get and then try and come up with investment beliefs of members of this committee and help to formulate some objectives, longer term objectives, with the intention of trying to get to net zero, and formulate a timeline, as well as maybe come up with some metrics that you might use to try and get to that point, and a timeline. So there are a number of recommendations falling out of this report. The first, which is to have this workshop in October. We'll be circulating some dates and try and come up with the date that has the best fit. And then from there, you would have some objectives. Also, to say, sort of start a high level carbon footprint measurement of the fund. So, and then obviously what you can measure, you can manage. Initially, the advisors will do this, but there are a number of companies that operate in this area and can do carbon footprint measurement. So initially, probably very, very high level will be carried out by the advisors, but they won't be best placed going forward to, or they might be, but it will be looking at all options as to who can carry out the footprint measurement going forward. And then you might want to do that every year. Obviously, you don't want to do that quarterly because that costs a lot of money. So again, it's looking at cost benefit as to how often you want to measure and what targets you want to set in reducing that carbon footprint. Carbon footprint measurement is probably, if you gave 3 different people to measure, you'll probably get 3 different answers because they all have different methodologies. So it will be best to use the same person to measure your carbon footprint going forward, so that at least you're using the same methodology to measure it. But then that's another process in deciding who you want to do it long term. So the recommendation again is whether to carry out that carbon footprint measurement of the fund. Again, at the last meeting, we talked about the stewardship code, where Ealing had been members of the stewardship code, but they have since changed the requirements of the stewardship code, and it's a lot more onerous. And again, it's about carrying out a gap analysis of where we are compared to what we need, where we need to get to for in order to become assigned up to the stewardship code. The other thing that we are recommending is, again, another gap analysis, because we know that there's another new requirement that's coming forward, which is the TCFD, which is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, which came up in the training. It's a directive which the UK government has made, which will require pension funds to say how climate is impacting their fund. At the moment, it's corporate schemes, very large corporate schemes that have to do it, but we know that the regulatory body for the local authority pension funds are working on how this will be implemented for local authorities. So it's coming our way, is looking at a gap analysis on where we stand with that and what is required. A lot of this will have a resource implication. So it's again looking at what resourcing will be needed and also the cost as to what you want to do. I think that's pretty much all the recommendations falling out of this report. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Bridget. I'll take any questions around just the report in general, and then perhaps for purposes of time, return to the recommendations and how we move them forward. So any questions?
It's not really a question, it's just to say, as Bridget said in her presentation, we could get carbon footprints done for nothing from companies we invest in. But as Bridget says, they all use different methods. If you go to any training, they all say, you know, it's a different way of doing it, so that's an issue. But that's not to say you shouldn't do it. And we have talked about this in the past. And just to say on the stewardship code, some pools, not London yet, but for example, Central, are producing a pro forma. So what we might need to do, Bridget, is ask the London CIV if Central are doing a pro forma to make it easier for the stewardship code. Perhaps the London CIV could do the same thing to make life easier, because everybody will have to do it eventually. So we could ask that behind the scenes. So there's lots of things going on. And Bridget, as Bridget said in her presentation, it's private companies with pension funds worth 5 million at the moment who have to do this, no, 5 billion, but they are next year talking about making us do it. So the more we can do in preparation, the better. So I think it's all a good idea, and it's something the government wants us to do anyway, and we just got to get on with it. And let's do it as cheaply as possible, maybe with the assistance of the pool, because we're all going to have to do it. So let's see if we can get help from, if they can do it sort of centrally or help us.
Absolutely. The more help, the better. Tony?
Well, what sort of cost are we talking about on the carbon footprint exercise? So we're going to have to repeat it annually. You could amount to quite a bit.
At the moment, I can't tell you, but I can come back to you. But it's I would say that we're one of the few in London who don't yet do it.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on a lot of this stuff is that the stuff that we don't yet have to do or don't yet have to do in a certain way, but at some point we will have to do it, and we will have to do it in a certain way. And it seems to make sense to have control of what we do, how we do it, and when we do it. And we'll have to do those things, even were we to choose to take no proactive steps regarding responsible investment, because it will come to us, even if we don't go to it. So at the very least, we need to seek to meet it halfway at the most cost-effective, in the most cost-effective way. Tony?
It wasn't that. My concern was because there are so many different methodologies of measuring the carbon footprint, you've got to choose one at the outset, and then you're stuck with that pretty much forever afterwards, because you can't make any comparisons between one methodology and another methodology. So we're going to be, certainly for 5 years or so, we're going to be stuck with whichever method we choose. So we want to choose something that, as you say, is cost effective.
You can get it done for free from the companies you invest, but then that would be a bit questionable.
Yvonne, if you're not using the microphone, other people won't be able to hear you.
Oh, sorry, I did press it, but it jumped off. Just to say, we could get it done free, as I said, by the companies we invest in, but then you can't. We invest in a number of companies, so then you can't compare. There are big people who do it, MSCI, and there's other people who do it, but they are, as Bridget says, they're expensive, and that's what puts people off. But they don't tend to do it each year. The local authorities who've done it, like Hackney and places like that, they do it once every 4 years. They don't do it every year because it'd be far too expensive, but it is expensive, and Bridget maybe could investigate those costs. Or we could ask the pool, where a lot of our equities are now with the pool, could they do it on our behalf for all of us? Because we only have a very small direct investment, because as Bridget said at the beginning, we tilted 4 years ago we started tilting away. So we've only got just over 1% directly invested in, but there is stuff in the pool, which maybe we could get them to measure it for us. And they are actually working on this at the moment. They're updating their responsible investment. So maybe we could get it done free or for very little.
Yeah, as Bridget said, we wouldn't do it every year. I guess also, it's a fast-moving world. It's absolutely true that in normal circumstances, you seek to retain the same reference point in order for comparisons to be meaningful. I guess it's possible that 5 years on in this sphere, things change in a way which makes previous reference points more difficult. But I think we're just taking advice from Bridget and our advisors. We make the best stab at the best value investment, Tony. I don't know what else we could do.
I'm just reluctant to go down a route where we're stuck with a heavy cost without being able to get out of it.
I don't think...
I like Councillor Johnson's idea that we go in with the pool. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think insofar as it's possible to do things collectively and jointly, then we would always wish to do that. And if they can provide at least a template through which we can measure ourselves, even if they can't help us measure ourselves, then anything like that is a step forward, isn't it? So absolutely, there's no point having these communal arrangements if we don't use them. Do you have an initial view as to the best way forward on the high level footprint, Bridget?
Yeah, so the high level measurement which the advisors will be doing is literally collating that information from the managers and then using a proxy, because you've also got the private market, which is not listed, and it's really quite difficult, and using some kind of proxy to measure what we have in the private markets. So that high level investment is not doing what the big expensive companies will do. So which is what I was saying further down the road, if you wanted to do that, then that would be a process where you might have to get quotes from companies and then decide. But this is a very high level, which is basically collating information that the managers already have. Managers being, the pool being one of the managers, because the pool obviously invests. So the pool will be providing that data, which will be put together by the advisors. So that's the very high level. So rather than us getting a company that independently go and measure it, which is obviously very costly.
Does that reassure you for now, Tony? Great. Paul?
Yeah, I think the report has got a good outline of where we're going, and I really welcome it. I'd be interested looking at Appendix 1. Yeah, Appendix 1. Where are we on that roadmap on Appendix 1? The word tilt is used, and engagement and investments are all coming about. So where we are, where do we pitch ourselves on that journey at present? And also, I think there's lots of positives in this report about where we're going and what our aims are, and maybe not this instant moment now, but how are we going to communicate that to the wider world so that they know that we're taking these steps and we're prompting our investments. So maybe in November, how are we packaging a message and involving comms to say that this is what active steps we're taking? So that would be, I think, one of the recommendations I'd like to see, is that we actually take this forward in publicising the steps that we are taking.
I've got a point partly connected with that second one, which I'll come to it. Bridget, on the diagram from Quiet Room, where my feeling is that we're in more than one place, probably rather than a set point. But broadly speaking, where would we think we could place ourselves on that little game?
I think we're doing quite a lot, because I mean, we're already engaging. We've already got a tilt, I guess, and I think this is just some independent, journey plan on how you can get there. Our advisors may have something different in the way we want to get there. I think the idea is that after our workshop, we will be able to come up with some kind of objective statement of where we want to go to. So we're very much, in a sense, at the beginning of the process for Ealing, and whether we use the Quiet Room journey is one way. But from looking at this, I can see that we're doing quite a lot already in that aim. But now is because if your target is net zero, you want to have an objective, a plan, and a way of getting there. And to get to net zero, you need to do some kind of measurement. So if you don't measure, you can't manage. So if that's your target, net zero, then there will have to be some kind of measurement and some kind of metrics set. And yes, that does cost money, but again, it's about, you know, cost benefit, where you want to get to.
Thank you. And on your comms point, I think there's two audiences. There's the wide world, to whom I guess we would wish to show that we were taking a common sense, progressive, virtuous approach. We've also got a narrower audience, which is the beneficiaries, members of the scheme, for whom obviously these things, they might view them as potentially coming at a cost and a cost to them. So I was going to suggest that for the purposes of the workshop, that we invite the members of the pension board to join us for that purpose, which both gets a broader degree of input, but also demystifies what we're doing for the purposes of the board, and ensures that we've then got channels out into that broader pensioner and deferred pensioner community, an active member community. Obviously the union's represented on the board as well as on this panel. So when I come to item, recommendation 1.1, I'll put in that caveat when we come to it. Yvonne?
I can't get my thing to stay on, it's right. Wobbly. Just to say, what you've just said is quite important, because we must remember that we are sort of quasi-trustees. It's not Ealing's money, it's the employees' money, it's the people who work for us's money. So we can't put out a comm statement as Ealing Council, because it's not Ealing Council's fund. We could ask Bridget to do something maybe, but we can't go using, it's a wholly separate thing. We're here as trustees working on behalf of the present employers, employees, deferred, as Steve said, and so on, or our present retired members. So it's not our Ealing's fund. And often people want to ask questions at council and so on. They can't, because it's not Ealing. It's nothing to do with Ealing, in the sense that, okay, Ealing would have to plug the gap if we were very stupid and wasted all the money, but we're here as trustees. So it's the employees, as Steve said. So we have to get that right. So doing any sort of press things, you'd have to be really careful.
That's great. Can I move us on to the recommendations then? Because I get a sense that there is broad support. So 1.1, the development of the workshop session, we agree to that with the addition that we will invite the members of the pension board. Bridget, agreed?
Yes.
Thank you. The initial high-level carbon footprint on the basis that Bridget outlined, is that agreed? And the work on the stewardship code principles, agreed?
Can I also suggest add in that we get in touch? I don't think London CIV have done it yet, but I know Central, the other pool, have got a format. So we could ask the London CIV to get hold of that format to make our life easier. Okay. Bridget could do that behind the scenes. That's
great. So 1.3, using whatever current support could be available for it. And ditto, I guess, with this snappily titled Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Agreed? Right. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Bridget, for the very thorough report.
Thank you.
Takes us on to item 10, the fund update for the quarter. But again, it's kind of an interim, intermediate report, isn't it? Because we had the full report last time, and we will have again the next time. So anything to add to the report on that, Bridget? We don't have Hyman's here.
Nothing to add to the report. I would be happy to take the item in private and confidential item, in private. There is a private and confidential item.
Perhaps if we take everything else and then we close the public side of the meeting and then we conclude with the brief update on
Sure.
that. Okay, any other points around item 10?
Can I just give the panel an update? Apparently there could be a union challenge to McLeod, and McLeod's explained in here what's happening, but there could be a union challenge, not by, I don't think it's Unison, I can't remember which union, but there could be changes in that field, so that it's watch this space really.
Okay, thank you very much. So sorry, Dee?
Comment, which when they talked about getting feedback from the fund managers, that was quite an interesting section, but when I got to Permira, they didn't really seem to tell you anything. And also like that Permira is one of the ones that wasn't doing so well.
I'm not hearing you very well, I'm afraid.
Okay, so I think I'll just check the page number.
Yeah.
So on page 14, top of page 14, it's
14 of 24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their report back didn't have a lot of substance to it, whereas all the other ones actually gave you a reasonable amount of detail, and I thought that was quite interesting. I just wondered why we didn't get a little bit more information from them, especially as I think they were one of the ones that weren't doing so well.
Okay. Anything about the feedback on Permira?
Let me. I can try and get a little bit more information on Primera and send it through. My only concern with Primera was the Permira is that whilst all the other managers have drawn down quite a lot of their money, Permira haven't drawn down as quickly as we would have liked. So it's something that I will take up with them and maybe provide a little bit more information even in between meeting.
Okay.
Just Dee's new to this, and what we do, we take the managers in turn and we grill them. And we haven't been able to grill them in person. They come and answer questions, and that's really useful. So I think the one before you came on, we had one of our private equity companies from America. They actually broadcasted from America, one of the ones that's doing quite well. So every so often we have them they actually come and talk to us, and they give us a presentation, they give us booklets, and we can ask them whatever questions we like. So that's really helpful.
It is, but obviously in a sort of cycle.
Yes.
Okay, we got recommendations 1.1 to 1.11, which are all to note, apart from asking us to receive 2 bits of training we've already received. So I'm taking those as having been already tacitly agreed. Agreed? Thank you very much. So apart from that relating to Appendix E, so I think we can now, unless there's any other business, we can close the public session.